Thank you for joining my presentation on unspoken vaccine hesitancy amongst healthcare workers. My name is Terrence Shenfield, and I am the co-owner of A&T Respiratory Lectures. I think this is a great topic because so many healthcare workers like you and I are vaccinated, yet there's a large percentage of healthcare workers that are unvaccinated. And as you well know, most of the patients that are in the ICU these days are unvaccinated. So this is going to be a good topic to talk about, like why exactly don't they get the vaccine, what are their fears, and so on. So sit back and let's enjoy. In today's objectives, we're going to be talking about some statistics. We're going to be looking at how many healthcare workers are vaccinated and how many are not. We're also going to be looking at adverse effects of the vaccine because one of the primary reasons why many healthcare workers do not get the vaccine is they're worried about adverse effects. I'm going to talk about what exactly is vaccine hesitancy. I'm going to talk about determinants of vaccine hesitancy, like what are the different reasons. I know some people feel that they're going to get an adverse effect. Some women feel that they will become infertile. Many people feel that it's a government conspiracy. There's a whole list of reasons why people don't get the vaccine. A lot of people don't trust the government and healthcare organizations, more the government. Most of the research that I've done on this topic has shown that people do trust healthcare organizations, they do trust researchers, they do trust the doctors, but they don't really trust the government. They feel that a lot of healthcare organizations are in the pocket of the government. In other words, they're like a talking point for the government, and then there's a lot of distrust for the government. We're going to talk about safety concerns, and then let's talk about herd immunity. A lot of people feel, I'm not going to get the vaccine. I'm going to let everyone else get the vaccine. This way I have herd immunity. And then we all heard of people losing their job because of not getting the vaccine. Is that right? Is that wrong? What do you think? So we're going to explore all these topics, and by the end of this presentation, you're going to have a good handle on exactly what needs to be done in the future. So let's talk about some stats of those who are unvaccinated in the healthcare environment. I'm not talking about the general population. I'm talking about the healthcare workers. The funny part is that the number of unvaccinated people in the general population pretty well matches the same number of healthcare workers. So the thought process behind not getting the vaccine may be pretty much generic between both healthcare workers as well as the general public. Now, you would think that if you are a healthcare worker and you have taken care of patients with COVID and you may have seen someone really suffer and maybe even die, why would you not get the vaccine? Yet, a significant portion of healthcare workers, like 22% of healthcare workers as of the time of this presentation, are unvaccinated for various reasons. Many hospitals, many healthcare organizations have now made it mandatory to get vaccinated, otherwise you're being fired. And I mean, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. There's a lot of widespread misinformation here on the COVID vaccine. Many people feel that it came out too quick. Many people think that the government was behind this and they have an alternative motive. Many people think for religious reasons that they don't need the vaccine. Many people want to see what happens if other people take the vaccine to see what happens to them. And many people just don't know. They are misinformed. They have conspiracy theories. So we're going to get a little bit more into exactly who is vaccinated, who is not. And as I told you, approximately 22% of healthcare workers currently are unvaccinated for a host of reasons. And we're going to get into the details for that as we move along. I have a few questions for you. How many of you work in a hospital that is mandated that the employee receives a COVID vaccine? Please put your answers in the Q&A. Say, yes, my hospital mandates that I get the COVID vaccine. Number two, since the vaccines have been developed so quickly, does that mean that their safety and efficacy has been compromised? Do you think they've really been brought to the market too quickly? So that's my question. Number three, do you feel that the vaccine you received improved your chances of survival if you happen to get a COVID-19 infection? So do you think the vaccine will improve your survivability? Number four, did any of you get COVID-19 after the vaccination? This is a very important question. In other words, did any of you get sick from COVID after the vaccine? And then the last question, have any of you been hospitalized because of COVID infection after the vaccine? So have any of you been hospitalized because you had a COVID-19 infection? Put all these questions in the Q&A because I really want to sort of explore the answers, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little later. So let me talk about the adverse effects caused by the vaccine. And that seems to be one of the major reasons why people don't get the vaccine, especially healthcare workers. The problem here is that misinformation is rampant. There's so much misinformation about the vaccine, and I want to give you an example of some of the misinformation that's being spread. I am very apolitical. I am not a Democrat. I am not a Republican. I don't knock the Democrats. I don't knock the Republicans. I got my own opinion. I think they're both a little bit off the wall, but here goes. On May 5th, Fox News host Tucker Carlson delivered a 10-minute monologue casting doubt on the safety of COVID-19 vaccines on his show, The Tucker Carlson Tonight. He announced that almost 4,000 people had died after getting the COVID-19 vaccine and added that those data came from the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, which is a U.S. government program that collects data on the side effects of the vaccines, or all vaccines. This was an example of a misleading statement. The reporting of the death to that database indicates nothing about what caused the death. In other words, you can report, but you don't know exactly what the patient died from. And the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, did an investigation and found no indication that the deaths were caused by COVID-19 vaccines. So they really didn't do a very good job. This is misleading information. So let me share with you some of the information I found that what are the side effects of this vaccine based upon published literature without being biased on a political party or my own personal opinion or anything like that. The most common reported side effects of getting the vaccine are a headache, you get fatigue, you get muscle and joint pain, you may get fever and chills, and you may get pain at the injection site. Me personally, I had my first shot, the second shot, and one booster. What did I feel personally? This is only my opinion. I only felt pain at the injection site for a day or two. Other than that, I didn't get anything. I didn't get fatigue. I didn't get headache. But this is me. Now, this may be different for you. So let's talk about some adverse effects that are of special interest. And I'm going to first approach this two different ways. I'm going to approach it from the mRNA vaccines, such as Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, and then I'm going to approach it from the adenovirus viruses, such as Johnson & Johnson. So with the mRNA vaccines, they have shown that some people have an anaphylactic shock, and they guesstimate it's about 10 cases per million. Now, to me, that's a very small number, 10 cases per million, but it is a number. Also, these vaccines should not be given to anyone with a known history of allergic reaction to any kind of vaccine components. So in other words, yes, can you get anaphylactic shock? Yes. Does it happen very often? No. There are approximately 10 cases, like I said, in 1 million vaccinations. Also, There have been some reports with the mRNA vaccine that unusual bleeding and blood clotting disorders, such as, and also facial weakness, seizures, loss of sense of taste and smell, and cardiac events have occurred. How often? Not very often at all. So let's now get our change our attention to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is what they call an adenovector vaccine. And what the most common side effect with that, and it's not common, but it does happen, and this is a very rare and unusual clotting syndrome involving the thromboembolic events such as blood clots and thrombocytopenia, which means low blood platelet count. These vaccines have been reported to do this on a very rare occasion. So this is really about the worst effect you can get from the vaccine. Over the next two slides, I'm actually going to give you a short video, each is about 4 minutes each, of how the two different vaccines work, Johnson & Johnson and Moderna and Pfizer. Each work by a different mechanism, but I figured if you understand a little bit exactly how they work, you'll have a better understanding about the side effects. So stay tuned and bear with me. The next two slides will be about 4 minutes each, and they'll be going over exactly how the vaccines work.
Developing vaccines is usually a very lengthy process, taking on average 8 years to get approved. Since a few years, we have the ability to create mRNA vaccines, which can be developed much faster. So how do these vaccines work? Are they safe, and how do they compare to traditional ones? But first you must understand how the immune system works. When a virus enters your body, it will attach itself to one of your cells and inject its DNA or RNA into it. This is like a blueprint for your cells, containing instructions on what the cell has to make. So in this case, the virus's RNA will tell your cell to make more copies of the same virus. They become factories, assembling new copies of the virus that can infect even more cells. But don't worry, our bodies have a defense system for foreign intruders. The immune system attacks any protein, virus, or bacteria that does not belong in our bodies, but it takes a few days for it to learn how to attack the intruder. Meanwhile, the virus factories are running non-stop, quickly replicating the virus and spreading it in your body. In other words, you start experiencing symptoms of whatever has infected you. After a few days, however, your immune system will have figured out how to attack the virus and will start producing antibodies. These attach themselves to the virus, preventing them from infecting more cells and marking them for destruction. As you can see, the immune system is remarkable, but it's slow to mount an attack. That is the reason why we can get sick in the first place. So to give it a helping hand, we developed vaccines. The main idea is to train your immune system to recognize and fight off an infection before it has occurred. Almost like showing your immune system a mugshot of the virus and saying, if you see this, kill it. There are various types of vaccines, but let's take a look at the new kid on the block, mRNA vaccines. To understand how they work, let's take the COVID-19 pandemic as an example. You might have seen pictures of the virus with its distinctive spikes. These spikes allow the virus to attach to specific cells in your body and infect them. Now, here's the key idea for the COVID-19 vaccine. What if we could train our immune system to recognize these spikes by having our own bodies produce them? To do that, researchers took the virus's blueprint, its RNA, and isolated the part responsible for producing the spikes. Armed with this blueprint, they created mRNA, or messenger RNA. This is a special form of RNA that can enter your cells and give them instructions. In this case, the RNA contains instructions to build the spikes of the coronavirus. Not the virus itself, just the spikes. So mRNA vaccines contain instructions for your cells that tell them to build a part of a virus in large volumes, almost like giving them a recipe to follow. Once this is happening, your immune system kicks into action and starts learning how to attack these intruders. Again, it takes some time for the immune system to fight off these spikes, but you won't get sick because it's only the spikes, not the virus itself. And that's it. Your immune system has learned how to attack the spikes of the coronavirus. It destroys all the spikes and even breaks down the mRNA vaccine itself. The only thing left in your body are special B cells or memory cells. These can linger around for months or years until the same virus infects you again. When that happens, the B cells can produce the correct antibodies right away, preventing the virus from spreading and making you sick. What's interesting about this mRNA technique is that it's relatively quick to develop a vaccine as soon as we know the DNA or RNA sequence of a virus. And secondly, because the vaccine only makes our bodies produce a tiny part of a virus, we cannot get sick from it. More traditional vaccines use weakened versions of the actual virus. This also triggers an immune response, but could also give you mild symptoms. Now you know how mRNA vaccines work. But don't take my word for it. All sources used to make this video are listed in the description below. Check it out if you want a more in-depth explanation. Give this video a thumbs up if you found it interesting and consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching, until next time.
Adenovirus vaccines are not really new. Adenoviruses are really common. They're really ubiquitous viruses, and they tend to cause things like the common cold, pink eye, so really common but more minor infections. An adenovirus vaccine is a virus that has been altered so that it can't make you sick, it can't replicate, it cannot integrate into your DNA. So they take out some really important parts of that virus genome. What's done to the virus is that actually a little genetic snippet is exchanged and placed into the adenovirus that is actually from the COVID virus. It's the section of genetic code that codes for the spike protein. The adenovirus is like a Trojan horse, except that what it's delivering is a good thing instead of delivering something that you don't want in your body. You get the vaccine, the adenovirus goes into your cell. It's got this Trojan horse code on it that makes the spike protein. That spike protein then goes to the surface of your cell. Then your immune system recognizes it and starts to make antibodies to it. In the end, what you get is your body makes the spike protein and you develop the immune response to that spike protein exactly like you do with the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine. Great news about this J&J vaccine is that it adds such a large supply of vaccine. This vaccine is stable at refrigerator temperatures for a longer period of time. It does not have to go into cold frozen storage the way that the messenger RNA vaccines are. That makes it much easier to deploy to a wider variety of places, so it's going to be more widely available. We'll be able to vaccinate so many more people. The other good news is that one of J&J's competitors, Merck, has now entered into an agreement to produce the J&J vaccine. So that will ramp up production capacity for the country much faster than we anticipated. What people should know about this is that it is a very effective vaccine. And the J&J vaccine was studied in places where there were a lot of the new variant strains coming out. It still showed very high effectiveness, 85%, at preventing severe COVID, and there were no deaths in the vaccine group who received the real vaccine. We are in a situation where we need everyone vaccinated, and we won't always have a choice of what vaccine we get. The vaccines are being allocated by the states, and they're being allocated where they can be put to the best use. They are all really good vaccines. I would feel comfortable with my family members getting any one of the three that's available.
I wanted to go over this slide with you. Many people fear the vaccine because they feel that it was a rush job, that, you know, scientists and clinicians didn't spend enough time and the government was really pushing this to make it happen very quickly. And yes, there was a push to make this happen very quickly, but that's not the first time a push to make something happen quickly was. You know, think about the H1N1 influenza, think about Ebola, think about the Zika virus, think about the SARS issue. There were so many national programs that had to address an immediate concern on the health care of this nation. So in the past, there are two types of programs that could have been developed. One was your traditional program right here, which consists of you know, they consist of a phase 1, phase 2A, phase 3, and then licensure. And then from a manufacturing point of view, they talked about small scale clinical trials, then they talked about manufacturing scale ups, and then they talked about large scale manufacturing. This is a traditional model. This is what everyone's used to doing, but there are times when you got to move quickly. And when you got to move quickly, you do it during an outbreak. And the outbreaks, like I mentioned before, think of Ebola, think of H1N1, think of COVID, think of SARS, think of the Zika virus. All of those things required some faster moving. And they developed platforms to move faster. So basically, they have what is known as an outbreak paradigm. The outbreak paradigm makes things work quicker. And basically, you noticed how much time is spent with the target ID, development partner selections, preclinical trial. This is shortened greatly during a outbreak. And then what they do is they look initially for safety, dose selection, then they go over safety and efficacy, and they make the whole process much quicker. You have to remember that biotech companies and vaccine companies have spent millions of dollars investing to make things work so much quicker. It's not like, you know, this is brand new to them. They have invested heavily into this. Another thing that's brand new in this environment is the use of next generation sequencing and reverse genetics. They've shown to cut development time of vaccines tremendously. So new technologies are out there. Pharmaceutical companies are investing heavy into making things work on an outbreak paradigm versus the traditional paradigm. So were these things rushed? Not at all. Are they safe? Absolutely. Were they shown to be effective and the efficacy of it? Yes. So all this was done on a shorter period of time. You wonder, why would you want to go back to the traditional paradigm over multiple years to make something come to market, which is typically the case here. Remember, technology got better. People know how to do things quicker. And we have some new sequencing, DNA sequencing, and reverse transcriptase sequencing that make things work much better. To further show you how well these vaccines work, I am sure you all heard of the New England Journal of Medicine, and they did a study that was published on February 4th, 2021, where they looked at 15,210 people who received the Moderna vaccine, and they looked at 15,210 people who received a placebo. And the results of this study was looking at the efficacy and safety of this particular vaccine. And of those group, nobody died. 0 person died. There was no mortality at all within this group. Was it effective? How was the efficacy? Efficacy was over 94%. That means it worked very, very well. Also, in regard to side effects, the side effects are the ones that I mentioned: soreness at injection site, maybe headache, maybe fatigue, maybe slight fever. But then it went away. This was 1 or 2 days after the shot, but most of the people responded very well. So you don't have to believe what you read in the news. You don't have to believe what you see on TV when the politicians talk. But just believe, if being medical people, the New England Journal of Medicine, is a reputable journal, and these were the results of this study. So I'm just saying, it seems like the side effects of these vaccines are really minimal, and there's a lot of talking points about who died, who this, who that, and I don't believe any of that. Now, with all that I just explained to you, I explained the efficacy, I explained the safety profile, I explained how it was conducted. With all of that, and us as healthcare workers, why is there hesitancy amongst healthcare workers to get the vaccine? What points do the healthcare workers think about? What makes them not want to get the vaccine when all the evidence I just explained is out there that makes it, reasonable to get it? So this is what we're going to do on the balance of this presentation. So let's talk about vaccine hesitancy. This is a term that is being used, and vaccine hesitancy is defined as the delay in acceptance, reluctance, or refusal of vaccination despite the availability of the vaccination services. So what that means is the vaccines are available. They can get it, especially healthcare workers. We were put on the front line to get the vaccine, but there are certain healthcare workers who decide not to get it. They're reluctant to get it. And the reasons for that are kind of complex. It could be many things. It could be communication and media historical influences. Many people, the only thing they read is the Post, or they read some kind of article, but they don't read medical journals. They read, the headlines on the news. They sit down on CNN or they sit down on Fox News, and they're influenced by the media. They go to YouTube, and this is where they're getting all their information. Really, it should come from medical journals. And, hopefully the medical community is not in the pocket of politicians. A lot of times it could be religion and culture. I've heard people tell me that God will take care of them. God will take them. They don't need the vaccine because God will watch them. And I am a religious person myself, but I believe God gave me the intelligence to figure things out. That's God's gift to me, and probably all of you, that if you do believe in some form of faith, that, God gave you brains to think. It could be your cultural thing. Certain people of different cultures don't believe in getting the vaccine. They have a whole different dynamics going on. Gender. It's been shown that most men are more receptive to getting the vaccine than women. One of the reasons why women don't, they feel that it could impact their fertility. In other words, they feel that it could make, maybe the baby will be some kind of genetic mutation or something going on, and it's going to impact, the concept of having a baby. Politics. We live this every day. All you got to do is go to MSNBC or go to Fox News, and you could hear the same story in two different ways. And it's amazing that how politics has influenced the decision with the vaccine. I don't think of, unless I'm not paying attention, but I've never seen where healthcare was more impacted through politics than particularly with the COVID pandemic. Risk perception. People who are younger think they're invincible. They're not going to die. People hear that I'm younger, I'm going to get sick, I'm not going to get hospitalized. But as I was mentioning in my previous lecture, there's this thing called long COVID, and the risk is more real than you think. People feel that maybe they live in a certain community or live with, just there by themselves, that their risk is very low. So they make decisions based on their risk perception. Finally, we get into design a vaccination program. Sometimes vaccinations can be very difficult. It makes it difficult. Not everyone drives a car. Me personally, I was able to get my vaccine through my primary care physician, and because I'm a healthcare worker, it was very easy. Getting the booster was very easy. And then education. I am doing education now on the vaccine, and you're hearing the whole day we're doing topics on vaccines, and we're talking about the COVID, and we're talking about this, and we're talking about that. There should be more of this. People should be educated on the vaccine. They should be educated on the consequences of not getting the vaccine, and so on. So this all leads into the topic of vaccine hesitancy and why people do it, all the listing above, and I'm going to get a little bit more into detail of each one. I think this is a pretty interesting slide because basically we do a comparison of vaccine-related fears. So the concept is to go over the general vaccines, polio, mumps, rubella, versus the COVID vaccine. And there are different fears going along with each one. Typically, if you are an anti-vaccination person, if you're an anti-vax and you just don't believe in getting your children vaccinated, you don't want to get yourself vaccinated, and there's a great chance that you're not going to get the COVID vaccine no matter what, because you have an innate belief that vaccines are bad for you and they cause autism or they cause infertility or they could be a whole bunch of things going on. General vaccines, some of the biggest fears, people have fear of needles. Can you imagine? Like, people are afraid to get a needle. They also lack trust in the science. They also fear the side effects. They also concerned about the personal cost for pharmaceutical company gains. This is a very interesting concept, the pharmaceutical companies' gains. I have a friend of mine, a colleague, he's an anti-vax person. He says, no way. He says, Pfizer and Moderna are making millions and millions of dollars. He says, I'm not going to contribute to their wealth. And I thought to myself, you're not going to contribute to the wealth, and so that is why you're not going to get the vaccine. But I says, why not get the vaccine and buy the stock in the company? If you think they're going to make money and they're making millions and millions of dollars, invest, buy the stock. I don't get it where a reason for your reluctance to get the vaccine is based upon the fact that the pharmaceutical companies are making money. They're going to make money. You take care of your health. Many times there's fear of infertility. A lot of people believe that it could impact that. Autism, we've heard this all the time. I mean, I've heard the concept of vaccinations and autism. There's a big drive for many people who believe that vaccines cause autism. And this lecture is not about that, but I've done some research on myself on that. And there seems to be it's not really true. There's no strong evidence. There are cases of autism with children, but they believe it's has to do with the way the vaccine is formulated. Now, this is general vaccine. Let's talk about COVID vaccine, fear of side effects and safety. People are afraid of the side effects. They read about the clotting, who got blood clots, who got this, who got that. They also felt that it was developed too quickly and not tested thoroughly enough. I just explained, I showed you the slide before where the development of vaccines can be fast-tracked in a pandemic. And the quality of the research and the technology is even better. Influence of politics. It's sad that we are such a polarized society in our politics. Either you're a strong Republican or you're a strong Democrat. Our politicians are polarized. No one reaches over each side to agree. At one time it was Trump's vaccine. Is it Trump's vaccine? Is it Biden's vaccine? Is it Pelosi's vaccine? I don't care. Yes, do politics influence it? Yes. Are they speaking points on the news? Yes. Should this influence your decision as a healthcare practitioner? I don't think so. How about the perceived cost? Typically, the vaccine is free. You don't have to worry about it. How about the perception that is unnecessary? Now, that's something. Some people are holding out getting the vaccine because they want everyone else to get the vaccine. And when everyone else gets the vaccine or gets sick from the COVID virus, they're going to build up an immunity, and you're going to have what is called herd immunity. So some people feel, why should I get the vaccine? I'll let everyone else get the vaccine. I'll let them all get sick and get better, and then the likelihood of me getting sick is very, very low. Then we got conspiracy theories. Some people once, people thought they were injecting nanotechnology into the viruses so they know what, you have little time bombs in you. Crazy. Some people believe it's social control, like they're trying to control the people. They're going to kill all the old people. Also, some people blame Bill Gates and the 5G network. I mean, these conspiracy theories are somewhat insane, and I don't buy into them. I'm not going to actually talk much about the conspiracy theories during this lecture, but these are some of the fears that people have. Let's talk about determinants of vaccine hesitancy, and there are a few. Gender, age, education, occupation, intent to get the flu vaccine, perceptions of health status, number of comorbidities, school-age children. Gender. Studies have shown that males are more prone to get the vaccine than females. One of the major reasons that females are a little bit awkward with getting it is because they believe it can impact their fertility. This is what this data is showing. Age. The older you get, the more likelihood you are going to get the vaccine. As we get older, we get comorbidities, we get diabetes, we get hypertension, we could be obese. So as you get older, the greater likelihood of you getting the vaccine. Education. There's a direct correlation between education and vaccine getting it. For example, the higher level of education, the greater likelihood that you're going to get the vaccine. The lower level of education, the lower level of you're going to get the vaccine. Maybe higher level people will seek out information that's beyond the news. They will read medical journals. They won't believe their cousin who comes in and says, "Hey, guess what? I'm telling you what I know." Occupation. Now in healthcare, we have various levels of occupation. We have the physician, we have the nurse, we have the respiratory therapist, we have the physical therapist, we have our administrators, you have the CNAs, you have housekeeping, you got, radiology, you got all these different jobs. Data has shown that based on your occupation in healthcare, for example, the highest percentage of vaccination rates in healthcare are from doctors, followed by nurses, followed by respiratory therapists. But the CNAs and the administrators in the hospital and the people in housekeeping and other jobs, they don't get it as much. So they are a higher level of hesitancy about getting the vaccine. I'm a respiratory therapist. I'm sure all of you are respiratory therapists or nurses. We touch patients. We see patients. We're in their face. So we also care for patients. So we don't want to mess with this. Also, if you don't get the flu vaccine, if you're an anti-flu vaccine, whatever status you got, why it's a pain in the butt, whatever reason you choose, you're not going to get the COVID vaccine. Perception of health status. People who are younger feel that if they get sick, they're not going to have long-term consequences. Number of comorbidities. People who are sick with diabetes, hypertension, being overweight, heart condition, whatever, they are more likely to get the vaccine because they realize their own mortality. School-age children, I did a lecture on that. Basically, if the parents are hesitant, the children are going to be hesitant. But more and more children now are getting vaccinated. So these are some of the determinants of vaccine hesitancy. Let's talk about some other determinants of vaccine hesitancy. We'll start with the slide. Based on your political party, Republicans have a 33% chance of not getting the vaccine. Independents, 23%. African Americans, 23%. Hispanics, 20%. Democrats, 10%. What does this mean? I don't know. What influences come upon each particular group that makes them make decisions on this? Obviously, I don't have a clear answer, but sometimes here are some of the concerns. Confidence in the capacity of healthcare services to respond to the pandemic. A lot of people don't have much faith in the government. They don't feel that the healthcare services provided by the government is adequate to meet the needs of the people. View of information provided on healthcare authorities. Fauci, think about this. I hear so much controversy about Fauci coming up with recommendations about masking or unmasking, or governors say you got to wear a mask to school, you don't. Some people are so confused about the misinformation being handed out by authorities. Perceptions of the adequacy of measures implemented by the government. Again, this is a toss-up. Based on your political party, based on what geographic area you live in, you may not feel that your government, your governor, your mayor is giving you the right choices. Self-perceived risk of getting COVID infection. Some people feel like they're not going to get it. You know, at my home, it's my wife and I feel in a way the likelihood of me bumping into people is kind of low. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not going to get the vaccine, because I feel if you live with a family, if you have multiple family members and you have a young teenage children in your house and they're going out meeting their friends, I would consider that being a high risk area, and then I would definitely get the vaccine. How about self-perceived risk to develop a severe disease infection? So in other words, some people feel they get the COVID infection, but that's about as far as it's going to go. They're going to get sick, they're going to get better. Some people believe that they're not going to get severely ill. How about frequency of agitation, sadness, or anxiety due to the physical distancing measures? Some people are really upset about the isolation caused by this COVID pandemic. Some people were locked in at home, couldn't go meet friends, couldn't go out to eat, couldn't go visit family members. This all impacts your decision whether to get the vaccine. And then the confidence in the efficacy and safety of COVID vaccines being developed. Some people just don't trust the information. Or actually what they're doing is they're getting information on the safety and efficacy of it through the wrong sources. If all your sources are YouTube and all your sources are the news at 7 p.m., you're doing yourself a disservice, because everyone has their own talking points. Sometimes you got to be independent and think for yourself and take care of yourself. I think this is an interesting slide. I did a little research and I found this article about vaccine hesitancy amongst medical students. Now, you would think that medical students would be, obviously, they're educated, obviously they know the risk, but they have their own convictions. 98% of medical students think that they will be exposed to the COVID-19 virus. They, almost 100% believe they absolutely going to come in contact with the virus. 23% of the students were unwilling to take the vaccine immediately upon FDA approval. So here you got medical students who understand research articles, who understand the FDA, are still 23%, a quarter of them won't get the vaccine, because even with the FDA approval. Some of the biggest concerns were the side effects and the lack of trust of information received from the public health experts. So they didn't believe what they heard. And, they also concerned about the side effects, even though the side effects were clearly labeled by the research studies they were putting out there. So I had a couple of testimonials that they read, and here's one of them. Personally, I would like to see the vaccine in the market for several years before receiving the vaccine, as I am concerned about the possible congenital defects in newborns born to mothers who receive the new vaccine. Here is the story of a medical student, obviously a female, concerned about congenital defects caused by the vaccine. She's not alone. You have a lot of people who are not that educated. They have the same fear. Here's another testimonial. I'd rather wait a little bit longer for a better crafted vaccination with fewer side effects, if any, than a rushed vaccine that ended up dissuading more people from getting it. It should be released with the knowledge of exactly how it will adversely affect people at all. So here you have someone who wants to wait a little bit who doesn't believe the evidence out there, wants to see what happens with everyone else. So here you got medical students who are pretty educated, and they have their own concerns. Kind of interesting. Regarding safety and efficacy concerns, the FDA issued an emergency use authorization of several of the vaccinations due to public health emergency. We had a COVID pandemic, and they put the rush job to get these things out to market. Among healthcare workers, knowledge of a specific vaccine increased their willingness to recommend that vaccine. So as healthcare workers, I personally got the Moderna. I had very little side effect. I'd probably promote the Moderna, probably the Pfizer too if I got the Pfizer. I'm not saying one's better than the other, but the idea is if we took it and we feel confident, we're going to share this information. We're going to be role models to other people. Some concerns about the speed of the COVID vaccine development is based on the fact that they feel that mRNA technology is new. They thought mRNA technology, this whole concept, the Pfizer, Moderna type of technology used to make the vaccine is brand new. Actually, it's not new. It's been used for over 30 years. So there's so much advances in mRNA technology. No one really knew about it because it was not on the front line. So they think mRNA technology is new. Why am I going to get a vaccine that has this new thing? But it's actually not new. It's been used for over 30 years. As I was mentioning before, there's a term called herd immunity. When you think about herd immunity, you could think about physiological immunity. Physiological immunity or herd immunity can be achieved through either vaccination or getting sick and getting better. If you get sick and you get better, you're going to build up antibodies to fight off the virus in the future. If you get a vaccine, you're going to build up antibodies to fight off a potential virus that comes to you. A lot of healthcare workers express preference over physiologic immunity rather than getting immunity through vaccination. So in other words, they'd rather get sick and get better rather than taking the vaccine because they don't trust the vaccine for so many reasons. But there's a lot of evidence showing that as healthcare workers who cared for hospitalized patients who were sick with COVID, and we saw them in the ICU and we saw them on mechanical ventilation, we changed our perception of what goes on, and we say maybe that vaccine ain't a bad thing. We all realize when we take care of patients and we hear that they're unvaccinated and now they're on a ventilator, and we get a little concerned. This is a wake-up call to us. But some people feel that herd immunity can be best achieved through getting the virus itself naturally, building up your own immunity rather than the vaccine, because they feel the vaccine in the long run is going to give them side effects. Another reason for hesitancy amongst healthcare workers is distrust of the government and healthcare organizations. One of the key factors of vaccine acceptance is trust. Do you trust your healthcare community? Do you trust your government? Do you trust that everything that they have is for your best intention? And that's not really the case. A lot of times media misinformation can cause public doubts. For example, you could have a talking point, someone saying that the vaccine caused all this problem and that the pharmaceutical companies are making millions of dollars and that this politician really doesn't care about you. And so all of these things influence our decision as humans as well as healthcare workers. Many healthcare workers have been exposed to what they call conspiracy theories, especially on social media. Such as that, I heard of nanotechnology. They're actually into vaccines having little nanotechnology devices. They're talking about the political gain and the financial gain of pharmaceutical companies, that they're making all the money. And I was telling you the story before about my friend who won't get it because he feels the pharmaceutical and Pfizer and Moderna are making all this money. I said, buy the stock. And also, they called the title of getting the vaccine out Operation Warp Speed. Maybe it would have been titled differently, like Operation Due Diligence would have been better. In other words, it's the way they rolled it out, the way the politicians used talking points, the way talking heads on social media make talking points. So all of this has led to a distrust. And also about Fauci. Either you love Fauci or you think he's a crook. You don't know which one to believe. Another thing with the COVID vaccination is the fact of autonomy and personal freedom. Mandating a vaccine to be taken violates a person's bodily autonomy and strips the person of many of their basic human rights. How is it right to force a person to take an injection? Suppose you work at a hospital and it's mandatory that you get the COVID vaccine, just the way it's mandatory that you get the flu vaccine. Is this a violation of your basic rights, that you cannot make your own decision about your own body? Informed consent gives each person the right to refuse medical treatment. But now you're being stripped of this, so you have no choice. At what point is it unethical to force medical intervention on a person? And then here's a very good question. Who accepts the liability if the person does not sustain a vaccine injury? So in other words, if you get sick from the vaccine and you have some pronounced side effects, who is responsible? So autonomy is a very ethical consideration in regard to the vaccine, whether people take it or not, and some people feel it infringes upon their own autonomy and their own God-given right to decide what they want to do with themselves. I could spend a whole presentation on the fact that job loss due to not taking the vaccine, but I just wanted to highlight some of the issues. I'm sure this is going across the country. Because it became mandatory that you took the COVID vaccine at many jobs, and if you were non-compliant, some people quit or were fired. For example, in Orangeburg, South Carolina, a regional medical center, their CEO told them that you have to get vaccinated by a certain date, otherwise you're not going to keep your job. So compliance to this means that you had to receive one shot, and you were granted exemption if it qualified. But the bottom line, if you didn't qualify for the exemption and you did not get this shot, you were getting fired. From this hospital system, 125 employees were fired as a result of this rule. So is this right? Can people get fired? I mean, I heard the argument that many of us worked through the COVID pandemic, before the vaccine came on board, we risked our lives, and now the same institution is going to fire you. It's a really slippery slope right here. I don't know all the answers. Like I told you, I could almost spend a whole hour speaking about this thing. I could give more examples, but I didn't want to, monopolize this whole presentation on this one slide. But this is something to think about. If you have any comments, put them in the Q&A, and we'll definitely talk about it. This is a very interesting slide because we talk about vaccine hesitancy amongst people of color. Although Black, Hispanic, Native Americans, and other people of color are disproportionately victims of severe corona disease as compared to whites, there's vaccine hesitancy amongst this group. There are various reasons why this hesitancy is there. Some of the thoughts are, was there enough participant diversity in testing the COVID vaccine? In other words, did they get an equal share of different people from different races and different ethnic backgrounds to see if the vaccine was effective? Are there other reasons why people of color choose not to get vaccinated? My next slide is going to talk a little bit more about this. I pulled this slide that talks about the percent of total population that received a COVID vaccine dose based on race, ethnicity, and based on different states. I did not pull up the whole country, so I only pulled up from Alabama to Illinois in alphabetical order. But if you're interested in looking more, the link is below. But as you can see, it's broken down into white people, Black people, Hispanic people, and Asian people. By and large, the Asian population are the most highly vaccinated people in this country. They choose to get the vaccine. They exceed. The next group after that is white. and so then it's followed by Black and Hispanic. But I just wanted to show you, for example, in the state of Arizona, 60% of the people who are white got vaccinated versus 51% who are Black versus 44% who are Hispanic. And this number over here, the percentage from points from the norm, will show you what percent versus white. California, 75% of the population got vaccinated versus 66 who are Black versus 65% who are Hispanic. Connecticut, 80% of the population got vaccinated who are white versus 66% who are Black versus 76% who are Hispanic. Florida, 62% of the population who got vaccinated were white, 44% were Black, 70% were Hispanic. Now, why this is the case? Why is there a hesitancy? Because the vaccine is available to everybody, but why do certain racial and ethnic backgrounds choose not to get vaccinated? I don't know. Is there a conspiracy theory? But, at the same time, they represent the groups that are mostly severely impacted by the COVID virus, and they're the ones who are in the ICU and everything like that. Why it's like this, I'm not exactly sure. It could be education, it could be cultural, it could be, it could be a host of things like I mentioned before. But this is alarming. You could just look at this slide, and like I said, I just pulled it up for a few states, not the whole country. You may be asking, what's the role of religion in COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy? And I did a little research on this, and I found that one study found that religious teachings prioritize prayer over medicine, thus resulting in vaccination hesitancy amongst its devotees. So in other words, some religions felt that if you pray, you'll be cured. The Vatican also issued a stance toward vaccination where they believe that vaccines from cell lines of aborted fetuses in COVID-19 vaccines is a no-no. So they say, if you have any kind of vaccine that comes from aborted fetuses, this is a problem. Also, Buddhism and Judaism, they have no central doctrines on vaccination, so it's widely accepted. Like I showed you in the slide before, the Asian population have a high percentage of getting vaccination. Other religious beliefs, such as Islam, they believe that vaccines with pork derivatives are prohibited. So everyone has their own little twist on this in regard to their own religion. So most of the studies that I was reviewing talked about vaccine hesitancy in healthcare workers, and vaccine safety and potential side effects seems to be a big issue on everyone's mind. Most of the studies found that individuals who were males, older age, or higher degrees like doctoral degrees were more likely to accept the COVID vaccine. In the general public, it's been found that females are less likely to accept the COVID-19 vaccine. They postulate that it may cause problems with infertility or serious side effects on their children, and they just worry about that, and that's a whole different thing about it. So what can we do to get more healthcare workers vaccinated? Basically, we have to come up with a multi-pronged strategy to get healthcare practitioners vaccinated. You have to offer incentives. You have to be a role model. You have to be doing some educational interventions. You might have to create some hospital-based protocols and mandates, such as making it prioritizing that if you want to work here, you got to get it. And also, you should just look around and care about your family. So as healthcare workers, we got to be role models, and we really got to share information that we know about the positive aspects of the vaccine. So I want to thank you very much for joining my presentation, and I just have these little words for you. As healthcare workers, we bridge the gap between healthcare policymakers and patients. What we do can influence patients so that they get vaccinated. We can also influence other healthcare workers. Vaccination rates amongst healthcare workers correlate positively with their willingness to recommend COVID vaccinations to their patients. A delay in COVID vaccination will put further stress on our existing health system and also will prevent herd immunity, meaning that one day we all will be vaccinated or we all been exposed and we'll be in a safe environment. It's up to us to be role models and give some positive messaging to the community, to our coworkers, and to our family members. And I want to thank you all for joining me. This is my reference page. I used more references than you have here. If you're ever interested in my other references, I'll be more than happy to give them. So, but these pretty well cover everything you need to know. And I want to thank you all, and I hope you have a great day.